We're going to take a look at formatting options that we have in the font group on the Home tab, starting with the font choice, the point size for the font, whether it's bold or italicized or underlined. And then we're going to Control-Shift-F for more formatting options with the formatting dialog box. The formatting options dialog box adds to our list of choices the ability to format bold and italicized at the same time, the ability to strike through text, to use superscript on text and subscript the text. We're going to work out of the font group in the Home tab. I've got some duplicate copies of a quote by Einstein, Albert Einstein's name, of course, the chemical formula for glucose, and just a series of place finishes, first, second, and third. And we're going to start with the font group. I'm going to select the second version of Albert Einstein's quote, "Any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction." But I'm going to take the second copy and use it for demonstration purposes and show you what's available in the font group. There are 300 different types of fonts, approximately, that can be chosen. And as you hover over each of the selections in the list, we'll get a preview to find out ahead of time what our font is going to look like if we select that option. Hovering down one by one by one, we get a preview every single time. It's a convenient way to see what you're in for before you click the button. I'm going to select Bakersfield Old Face by left-clicking that. And in addition to changing the font, we can also change the point size in a couple of different ways. We have a drop-down list that has point sizes on a graduated scale that we can select by pressing the arrow key. I'm arrowing down, and each subsequent number makes the font a larger point size and a larger point size. I can press the up arrow key and go back to 11, or I can left-click and select directly one of the point sizes and make it 24. I can also go into the field and manually put a number in there, as long as the number doesn't exceed 409, which I'm going to exceed it right now, enter. And Excel gives me an error message. The font size must be between 1 and 409 points. That's because the maximum point height of the row is limited to 409.5 points. So I'm going to left-click OK to acknowledge that and change the point size to something that makes a little bit more sense, like 11 point, which is where we started. In addition to changing it directly in that field, we can also left-click the increase point size command button or the decrease point size, and every time we push one of these buttons or click on one of these buttons, we move up and down this scale. So I'm at 9 point. I'm going to leave it at that, left-click and close that drop-down list. I can also make the font bold by using this toggle switch, and I can undo that by left-clicking the toggle switch again. And instead of the toggle switch, I can press Control-B as a shortcut to making the font bold. And again, I press Control-B and it turns it off. The Italicized Command button works the same way. On, off, Control-I, on, Control-I, off. The next button allows us to underline the text, either in one of two ways. The default is to have it not underline at all. And we have two other choices with this. Left-click, I can underline it once. Drop-down, I can double underline it. To turn it off, just treat it as a toggle switch and we turn it off. So those are the options that we're going to cover in this movie in the font group. But there are two other ways to access these options. If you double-click any cell that contains text and then left-click and drag to select the text, we'll get what's called an image, and if I hover over it, I'll get the whole thing, of the mini toolbar that has functionality to allow us to change the font. There's our 300 font choices. The point size, which we set at 9, it's currently at 9. We can make it bold, italicize it. We can change the color of the font. We're going to cover that in another movie. And we can increase the point size and decrease the point size. I'm going to escape out of that. And we can also right-click that cell and get the shortcut menu and another toolbar above the shortcut menu that has the same formatting options that we've used before, plus many more that we're going to cover in upcoming movies. So those are the three ways to access the command buttons, but those are not all of the formatting options that we have. There's also a formatting dialog box that we can launch in one of two ways. I'm going to escape out of that. And one of the ways we can get the format dialog box is to left-click the dialog box launcher in the font group, and we get the Format Cells dialog box, and we're on the Font Group tab on this box. We have some of the same options, but we have a couple of them on here that were not available on the mini toolbar or in the font group or in the toolbar that's above the shortcut menu. So we have the ability to change the font. There's our 300 fonts. We can make it italicized, we can make it bold, and we can make it bold italicized. It didn't take effect because the preview option doesn't work with these selection choices. You have to actually left-click OK to get the formatting that you selected applied on your text in your cell. So I'm going to left-click OK, and we have bold italicized. The other way to launch that dialog box is to press Control-Shift-F. I'm going to left-click Regular to go back to regular font, leave it at 9-point, and show you that we have a couple of underlining choices in addition to the ones that we had in the font group. I'm going to double underline that version of the quote, left-click OK, go up and select the first version of the quote, Control-Shift-F, drop down and single line that, left-click OK. Select the first instance of Albert Einstein's name, drop down, select accounting, and what accounting does, we get a single line under the text, but it extends the full length of the width of the cell instead of extending the length of the width of the text, as in the prior two choices. Control-F, we get the same thing, only a double line with the other accounting option. It extends the full width of the column. The other choices, Control-Shift-F, that we have is to strike through the text, left-clicking OK. It draws a line through a text. This can be useful if you have a note on a worksheet that you want to keep for reference, but it's not currently applicable. For instance, going down to the second glucose option, before I launch the dialog box again, I want to make a selection here. I want to select the number 6, and I left-clicked and dragged over that in the formula bar, Control-Shift-F, and I did that because I want to subscript the number 6 to make the chemical composition of glucose display like it should. Doing that twice more to the 6 that follows the C and the 12 that follows the H, I can now display the chemical composition of glucose in the way that you would see it in a textbook. Doing the superscript on first, second, and third gives us sort of the opposite effect. Superscript, OK, and we get a look for first that's more consistent with the way you would see it in a professional document. So we took a look at some formatting options in the font group in the Home tab, where we could change the font and select from over 300 different font types. We could change the point size. We could make the text bold. We could italicize it. We could underline it or double underline it. We had more formatting options when we launched the Format Cells dialog box. We found we had the option to use bold and italic at the same time. We had 2 additional underlining options that would span the full width of the column, and we have the strike through, the superscript, and the subscript options as well.